Everyone, welcome back to another episode. Everyone had a great and long, relaxing Thanksgiving Day weekend, spending it with friends, family, or on your own. I hope you guys enjoy time off. But now that we are back, I come to you with another interesting topic, and this week it is the gluten-free diet or the gluten-free lifestyle. So I wanted to give a little beginner's guide to the gluten-free lifestyle. So if you're thinking about going gluten-free for personal reasons, maybe you've been recently diagnosed with celiac disease, you may be feeling a little bit overwhelmed because there's a lot of information out there and it can be tough to kind of sort through it all. So today I put together this little beginner's guide to the gluten-free lifestyle, and we'll cover everything you need to know from what gluten is to why you might want to avoid it, why some people avoid it, and how to make the switch to a gluten-free lifestyle. So first of all, what is gluten? Gluten is just a protein found in wheat, rye, barley, and it gives bread and most baked goods that chewy texture, the elasticity. That's why they say don't overmix your pancakes, don't overmix your muffins, don't overmix your baked goods, because the more you mix, the more you're going to build up that gluten that holds the structure. Why you can get like a really dry, thick, dense cake sometimes if you overmix. So for people with celiac disease, gluten is problematic because it triggers an immune system response that damages the small intestine. And this is because they lack or have underdeveloped villi, which are in the small intestine. So for the average person without celiac disease, your villi look like this. For someone with celiac disease, their villi would look like this. And so with that, you're getting increased permeability into the bloodstream. And so people with celiac disease have a wide range of symptoms, which we'll talk about here in the next little section. So why go gluten-free? There are a few different reasons why someone might want to go gluten-free. The most obvious reason is celiac disease, but there's also a growing number of people that are choosing to avoid gluten, like myself, for non-medical reasons or for personal preferences, or maybe something else that they've read in a different space, like integrative, functional, and alternative medicine. So how do you know if you have celiac disease? Maybe you don't even know where to start. Maybe you don't know what category you fit in. Maybe you get a little bit discomfort from gluten, but you don't know, is there an issue? So some of the most common signs and symptoms of celiac disease are diarrhea or constipation, really, really sharp pains in the stomach discomfort, bloating, weight loss or weight gain, and skin rashes. And to identify this, your doctor is either going to run some blood tests or take a biopsy from the small intestine, which will confirm or deny celiac disease. So a blood test is going to look for the antibodies that incorrectly interact with the gluten protein, and the most common test is the tissue transglutamase, IgA TTG IgA test. And this is kind of similar of how we diagnose a sensitivity, but you really have to be careful because not all tests are as valid and reliable as others. So here at Infinity, we work with our partner Team Biohacks, and we have like gut zoomers or food sensitivity tests that rely on IgG, IgA, and inflammatory markers to see if maybe you're having a reaction to one of the proteins found in gluten. Maybe you're having a reaction to all. Maybe you have a complete gluten allergy, wheat allergy. This will all be confirmed or denied through tests. A biopsy from the small intestine, this will most likely be something that you get from your gastrointestinal doctor, but people with a positive blood test will likely need to have a biopsy. And during this process, the technician or healthcare professional, whoever it is, takes a small sample from your intestine, and that's how they can check for the damage. So going back to the villi that are like this, or the villi that are like this, or like this, that can be confirmed through one of these biopsies. Some people find that they feel better when they cut gluten out of their diet. Some people find that they have more energy, they feel less bloated, they're experiencing fewer digestive issues. Others may avoid gluten for ethical reasons. You know, I have a wide range of clients who choose to go gluten-free for many reasons. Some people are really aware of the impact that the wheat industry has on the environment, much like why people choose to go gluten for ethical or vegan for ethical reasons. So whatever your reason is, um, you know, educate yourself and do what makes you feel best. Recently, there's been a classification of people known as NCGS, non-celiac gluten sensitivity, which is something that I see a lot in our practice. And these individuals do not test positive for wheat allergy or for celiac disease, but they start to feel extreme discomfort after eating gluten. And this could be in a variety of symptoms. So this is really controversial right now because some experts believe it and some believe that, you know, it's not a diagnosis at all. The evidence is still mixed, but if you feel better when you abstain from gluten, then there's no reason that anyone can tell you differently. You know, it is your choice. So once you step into the functional and alternative medicine space, you'll see a lot of advocacy for a gluten-free lifestyle. And this is a big reason why I decided to go gluten-free. So there's research showing that the molecular structure of gluten, which is, or glat, I can never pronounce this right. It's GLIDIN because there's different molecular structures within gluten. This is the protein portion of gluten, and it closely resembles the thyroid gland. So when the gliadin breaches that protective barrier in the gut, again, we talked about permeability in the gut, toxins leaking through the tight junctions and causing inflammation, these antibodies to gliadin also cause an attack on the thyroid because they see them as the same structure, if that makes sense. So if anyone is interested in reading this article with the citations, I'll leave it below in the comments because I thought it was super, super interesting. And like I said, once you step into the functional and alternative medicine space, you'll really start to see a huge advocacy for a gluten-free lifestyle, many other reasons than what I just mentioned, but this reason in particular was why I decided to go gluten-free. I'm really trying to optimize my thyroid. So this article is suggesting that, you know, a gluten-free diet would be really beneficial to those trying to heal or optimize the health of their thyroid. And I can say that after going gluten-free for like 3 weeks and then trying gluten again, I felt such a huge difference. So give it a try, see how you feel, even if you're just doing it for pure curiosity, kind of like human science experiment stuff. Give it a try and see how you feel. Whatever the reason is that you decide to go gluten-free, know that you're not alone. An estimated of 1 out of every 100 people have celiac disease, and many more are choosing to go gluten-free for other reasons, like the ones I just listed. So now that you've made the decision to go gluten-free, where do you start? How do you go gluten-free? The good news is that there are so many resources than there were before, even like 5 or 10 years ago, to help you make that switch to a gluten-free lifestyle. There is now gluten-free products available in almost all the supermarkets. I even see gluten-free things like at the dollar store. And restaurants are really increasing the amount of gluten-free options that they have. You know, when you go to a restaurant, you can see that they have like a little asterisk next to it or a little like wheat thing with a circle around it that stands for gluten-free. So feel free to try those out next time you go to a restaurant. And one of my big suggestions would be when you're first starting out, the best thing to do is focus on adding new gluten-free foods to your diet the same way I talk about adding fiber. You know, don't go 0 to 100 and start taking away everything else. Just find a way to add more of those things to your food rather than taking away all the foods that contain gluten. Eventually, that will be done in order to go gluten-free, but there's no need to completely overhaul your diet all at once. It can be extremely overwhelming, and you'll be more likely to give up if you go 0 to 100 overnight. Start by trying out new gluten-free recipes, experiment with gluten-free foods, flours, products. Texture does change, like I said. you're taking away one of the main characteristics of like baked goods and bread. So there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. But once you've got the hang of things, you can start to phase out those foods that do contain gluten. And a few more tips that can help you kind of transition are reading labels carefully. So many processed foods are going to contain gluten, even if they don't contain the three main gluten containing substances: wheat, rye, or barley. So just read the label. And something that is labeled gluten-free is not necessarily super healthy or anti-inflammatory. So get organized. Meal plan, batch cooking can save you a lot of time and hassle in the long run. Get some support from your friends and family, or some resources, some healthcare professionals that you trust. Find Instagrams of dietitians, doctors, accounts that are gluten-free to give you some ideas and help you stay motivated. This really, really helps along the journey. I happen to go gluten-free at the same time that 3 or 4 of my other colleagues were going gluten-free, so it really helped that we were all trying out like different recipes. One precaution that I will say, when you're looking for ready-made gluten-free items, since you're taking out that main characteristic that gives that bread or baked goods that elasticity, you know, when you break open a fresh loaf of bread and you squeeze it down, you're not really going to get that with a gluten-free product. And if you do, it's because they're adding in things like sugars, gums to make up for this. So these additives may affect you in the same way as some of the things that you're trying to avoid, or some of those negative effects that you're trying to avoid or that you're feeling when you consume gluten. So that's something to be wary of. It's not something that you're going to be able to avoid 100%, but it really helps to be mindful, and some things work better than others. Like I recently tried a few different gluten-free breads, and I think I finally found my one. You know, there's a good combination of like the moistness of the bread and the sponginess. So does that bread contain some additives? Yes. Does it contain as much as some of the others I saw? No. Are there some that had completely no additives that I just couldn't stomach? Yes. So find that happy medium for you and just be mindful. Once you take these precautions when you're looking for gluten-free items, already skipping ahead of myself. Making the switch to gluten-free doesn't have to be this scary thing. Plan it out a little bit. There's some trial and error. You'll be on your way to a less stressful, happier, and less inflamed lifestyle. But if you're having a hard time still differentiating between what has gluten in it and what doesn't, I'm going to list off some of the common gluten-containing foods, and then I'll show a little infographic of some popular swaps that you can make. So things that are always going to contain gluten, unless they're made gluten-free, but 99% of the times your products that you're probably buying right now have gluten in them. Bread, all wheat-based bread. Pasta, all wheat-based pasta. Cereals. So most cereals, unless they're labeled gluten-free, I know that Cheerios is now. Baked goods, cakes, cookies, muffins, breads, breadcrumbs, pastries, snack foods like candy. A lot of candy have gluten in them. Muesli bars, crackers, a lot of pre-packaged convenience foods, even sometimes roasted nuts will have gluten. Flavored chips often contain gluten. Pretzels, this is something that you can get a gluten-free swap for, and they are almost identical. Sauces, this is something you wouldn't think of because, again, when we describe gluten, we're describing it as this elasticity thing, but a lot of Asian sauces or Asian inspired sauces have gluten in them. So soy sauce, gluten, teriyaki sauce, hoisin, marinades, a lot of salad dressings, soups. You wouldn't really think that, but most soups are made with a roux, and that's a base of flour, butter, sometimes broth. So you're going to get some gluten in there as well. Beverages like beer and some flavored alcoholic beverages, pizza, the lovely, lovely pizza, couscous, and like I mentioned, broth with added flour. So another question I get is, what are non-gluten free? Like, is this gluten free? Is this gluten free when you're looking on a menu? So these are some gluten free items that are not like made gluten free. These are naturally gluten free. So if you're already eating these, you don't have to find substitutes. You're already good. So meat, fish, poultry, all types are always going to be gluten free, except for if they're battered or coated in some kind of like breadcrumb or like chicken fingers. Chick-fil-A chicken fingers, those are not gluten-free. Eggs are always going to be gluten-free. Whole eggs, egg whites, egg yolks. Sometimes if you get those egg bites, look into that. They may have some kind of flour, so they may not be gluten-free. Fruit is gluten-free. Berries, melons, pineapples, bananas, you name it. Vegetables, all the vegetables. So potatoes are gluten-free. Peppers, mushrooms, asparagus. Grains like quinoa, rice, buckwheat, tapioca, corn. Uh, Oats is a controversial one because sometimes you get some cross-contamination there, but if they're labeled gluten-free, um, you still want to take a precaution, especially if you have celiac disease, because if you are having gluten-free rice, but it's made in or gluten-free oats and it's made in a facility that also processes gluten-containing products, then you're running into some cross-contamination there, but that is up to your discretion. Then you have starches and flours like potato flour, cornstarch, corn flour, chickpea flour, um, buckwheat flour, coconut flour, tapioca flour. These are all naturally gluten-free. Nuts and seeds, so almonds, walnuts, pistachios in their raw form are going to be gluten-free. Olive oil, coconut oil, butter, and then all of your herbs are gluten-free. And then most beverages, except for beer, unless it's labeled gluten-free, are going to be gluten-free. So vodka made from potatoes, tequila made from agave. So even your alcohols are going to be gluten-free. So now, last but not least, I will share with you some swaps or alternatives for some popular things that they have out there. So gluten-free pasta for like a chickpea pasta. Bonza is a good brand. I know that Live GF, so Live Gluten Free, is another good brand, and they have, I think it was brown rice pasta, soy sauce. You can get coconut aminos, which I prefer, just because I like the taste. They have gluten-free graham crackers. They now make gluten-free Oreos. You have gluten-free cereal. And then that was random stuck in there, gluten-free licorice. But that's, giving you another example of things that you may not think contain gluten, but that do. I wouldn't really think that red vines or Twizzlers would have gluten in them, but they do. So it's just something to be mindful of. Like I said before, whether you're going gluten-free because you're newly diagnosed with celiac disease, maybe you have an autoimmune disorder and you have some inflammation going on and your general practitioner suggested that you go gluten-free, or maybe just trying it as an experiment. Going gluten-free can be a lot of fun. It can be a new way to switch things up. It can be a hassle if you're treating it like a job, but honestly, if you're not consuming a diet of a lot of processed foods or a lot of prepackaged foods, you probably don't have a diet that had a lot of gluten in it anyways. There were very few swaps that I had to make when going gluten-free. Bread was one of them, but other than that, I eat a lot of rice, I eat a lot of quinoa, I eat a lot of beans, a lot of potatoes, and all of those are naturally gluten-free. So there weren't that many things in my life that I had to swap out. And because I'm not diagnosed with celiac disease and I don't have to maintain gluten-free, there are times where I'll go out and enjoy something that does have gluten in it. I will tell you right now that gluten-free pizza and regular pizza do not taste the same. To me, they are not as good. The gluten-free pizza is not as good as a regular pizza. So there are some times where I decide that I'm going to enjoy a night out with my family, friends, significant other, and have some pizza. I do feel bloated. I do feel a little sluggish, but I still get to create those memories. Now, if you're celiac, I definitely recommend that you stay away from gluten because this is now a medical condition, and one of the main treatments is maintaining a gluten-free diet. But if you're like myself, or you're going gluten-free for any other personal reasons, then try it out. Give it a couple weeks. You can always revert back to your old lifestyle. This is not the end-all be-all. So I hope that you guys learned a little bit about how gluten and gluten-free lifestyles work, and maybe you are inspired to make a couple swaps yourself. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to leave them down below, and we will be back next week for another episode of Health Unfiltered. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you